Please welcome Charlie Maxwell.
Thank you, Steve. I'm delighted to be here. This is a group of people that understands the problem. We all have different views as to timing. We have different perspectives as to how serious it's going to be or what the effects of it are going to be. But we're united by an understanding of the direction that the system is going and the inevitability of some kind of damage and penalty to the system that's going to come from the fact that so few people really understand out there among the wider electorate and among Congress and among the academia and among the corporations. Really, so few people do understand the issues. It is amazing because they are being set out all the time, but they're being set out by many countergroups. The oil industry itself is a huge countergroup. Some people are in the industry are telling it like it is, but an awful lot of people within the industry have hopelessly varying views. And how can the average person look at what the oil industry is saying and really take any direct policy guidance from it? So it's a real issue. I thought in my limited time I'd share with you some things that I think have not been emphasized so much. These are things that are side issues in certain cases, but they bear on the main issue, I think, pretty certainly. The first of these is that there really are three undeveloped oil frontiers that make a very big difference to the investment world. The first of these is the deep water. We are just coming into the deep water. Perhaps 5% of the deep water prospects have been looked at so far. We are in a situation where the deep water potential is going to be maximized over the next 10 years. Most of the good opportunities, they say in the oil business, have already been taken, but deep water is one of the great opportunities that hasn't been taken yet. It, of course, requires a great deal of technology and huge amounts of money. The new semi-submersibles are out there at $550,000, $600,000 a day leasing cost, and they are running, $600 and $700 million to build. Incredible size that makes it difficult for small companies to participate in this play. The second great frontier, I think, is the economic frontier. That is, things that today, at the present price levels, are economic that were not yesterday. LNG would be the classic example here. LNG can be landed, in theory, at around $4.50 or $5. We can put it into the pipelines and probably bring it to the customer at $6 or $7. And then there's hopefully some kind of a profit on top of that. And the oil industry is betting a lot of money. Some have estimated about $100 billion so far, that they can develop this stranded gas abroad, bring it in by liquefying it, regasify it over here, and run it backwards through the pipeline system to the places where it's required inland in a replay of imported oil. It has a lot of danger because it's often coming from the same customers that supply us with our oil, and there's all kinds of political issues there. It has a danger for the dollar because it's a drain on the dollar. But it is going to come, and it's going to be one of the few answers that I can see honestly that will work. We do have the technology down cold. We are able to do this quite efficiently. We do have the supplies abroad in quite variation so that we're not dependent on one big supplier for this. And there is a huge desire on the part of many holders of this stranded gas to get their gas into the market first, because it's an extra stream of income at a time when they desperately need it. And then lastly, there is the geographic frontier. And by that I mean that we can go to places today that we were not available to us in the past, either because we didn't have the equipment to get there, didn't have the political access. I'm thinking examples of some of the Russian ex-USSR affiliates, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, that Caspian area, Azerbaijan. We also, I think, are going to have a renewal of interest in the Middle East, because we know that there are huge reserves left to be developed in the Middle East. And I think you see that in something like Halliburton's decision to move their world headquarters to Dubai, to be right there on the spot where they can concentrate on where they think the largest reserves are. It won't be easy in the Middle East. It never has been. People say the Middle East is dysfunctional. My God, the Middle East has been dysfunctional for the last 50 years. So the issue is really that we don't have the cushion of surplus capacity to deal with the ups and downs of the Middle East. That's the problem, not the Middle East itself in terms of somehow being a lot worse than it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. I think that as I'm now changing subjects on you, as I look at this vulnerability that has been expressed here by a number of speakers, I think correctly so, that these are the kind of changes that take place, firstly, are going to be determined in their seriousness in part by the speed with which they take place. If somebody says today, with perhaps no more than 1 million barrels a day of surplus capacity in the system, that we should squeeze 1 million barrels a day of demand out of the system, which is what we've done in the last 2 years. We have squeezed about 1 million barrels a day from what it should have been under normal circumstances by forcing demand down by higher prices. That's what we estimate. And we think that that kind of level is over 2 years, did not cause extreme distress, although we're beginning to see signs. As Henry said correctly, the idea that these higher prices are not causing any damage is certainly wrong. We can see that in the United States, we're now hovering along the line of zero growth in petroleum use. In Europe, they're down a little bit. OECD is down a little bit. And I think the application, a couple of more months, we'll see many parts of the world beginning. You know, it's a question of how high the price of oil goes and then how long it's applied. And now we're getting towards 13 or 14 months above 75, and we're getting, some very high numbers just recently. So I think we will see a reaction, and I think we'll be happy to see it, because there's got to be some limits to this thing. And I agree very strongly with Henry that with the new oils being developed by the Saudis, Corsania and so on, that's going to be coming on stream in the winter and early spring, and with a little bit more coming out of OPEC as they regret and try to correct their mistake, and perhaps a slowdown in the United States because of the prime mortgage problem, one can really see us pulling back a little bit, along with, I think, many other commodities, giving us a little rest. But I want you to know that I don't see that rest as lasting more than 6 or 8 or 10 months. More children are being born in China and India all the time. More cars are on the road. The whole thing is progressing forward, and we will progress forward as always with bits, ups and downs. And I think we're in a very attractive up right here. I think we're going to roll over the top in the next few days, start down, and then we'll come down to maybe 75 or 70. The principal point to be gleaned from this is that those people that in all honesty and all integrity told us that we were coming back to $30 or $35 or $28, they are the ones that are going to suffer the most. If it's an oil company planning, they are planning to go ahead as Exxon is without getting any semi-submersibles under contract, because they can get all the semi-submersibles they want at very low costs in 2009, according to their plans in 2005. Exxon is without semi-submersibles until 2016 because they guessed wrong about the market. And I think many companies are in that same position. But back to this vulnerability issue, I think that firstly, the startling effect of the kind of trigger that we could have, whether it's 1 million barrels a day coming out, suddenly, Nigeria breaks out, Hugo does something new. The problem is how fast it occurs. If it occurs quickly and we have to make an adjustment in 30 days, I think it will really hurt the system. If we're talking about an adjustment that we can make over 6 months or 9 months, and that's the way the government would like to see it, and that's the way the government will try to arrange it when we can pull storage out and perhaps get over it that way, or help Europe out. So it's really a question of how fast these things occur. This is why it's so important we get the CAF standards in. This is why it's so important we get the insulation standards for building going. The more we can do before that trigger is pulled, before some event sets this stuff off, the better off we're going to be. That's not generally understood, but I'm with Henry on this one. I think we're going to go marching into the maw of the dragon with banners flying, drums beating, fifes fifing. This one's going to be, everyone's enjoying themselves. There's no real problem tomorrow. You walk out of here and the world is the same world that you left before. You go home and it's the same. The kids are fine. The schools are operating as they're operating. The school football team is doing really well this autumn. For God's sake, what's all the worry about? Well, you're one of the few that are worrying, and the rest of the world is not. But we do know what's going on underneath the surface. I did want to comment that one of the things that is hurting us, and it's not generally written up very much in terms of getting more oil on the market, is that some of these countries, I think the Saudis are particularly notable in this, don't really want to produce too much if that production would take the Saudis from, say, 12 million barrels a day up to, say, 20 million barrels a day to 25, big bell-shaped curve, over the top and down. I think they understand now something more about, they've seen these graphs. They may not know who Mr. Hubbard is, Dr. Hubbard is, but they know what a graph looks like. And I think they're very apprehensive about denying their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren a shot at the wealth that is being produced, and I think they don't want to go from Bedouin to Bedouin in 4 or 5 generations. So it's my private view, and it's based on my trips to Saudi Arabia and my talk with the oil minister on several occasions, as well as other notables, that the Saudis, in fact, are being counted on by the IEA to produce, if you look back at the charts, at least to 2005 and 6, to produce something in the range of 20 million barrels a day down the road, and then 25. I think the maximum we're ever going to see out of the Saudis is something between 12 and 15 million barrels a day. And then they'll go flat and run it out over a number of generations. They call that resource nationalism, but it does make some sense from their point of view. And I think we have to just accept that they consider that to be an advantage to them in the longer term. Is it an advantage to us? I would argue that it is, because it forces us to our senses earlier. If we only come to our senses in another 6 or 7 years when the Saudis are at some much higher level, I think that then there is no answer for us. We just come down with the rest of the Saudis. But I think that if this is going to happen, it is better that it happens early in the system, and we can make adjustments for it. So I don't think that's a big negative, but I thought I would finally end up with how I think all this is going to come out. Badly, I think, but I want to say specifically, I think that there is no great fuel that we can inject into the situation as a substitute for oil going flat and then starting down. I obviously have studied the alternative fuels, and they are not big enough, they're not fast enough growing, and they're not cheap enough to work. The greatest help will be the import of LNG, and I think that's a terribly important thing, and I think it'll solve maybe a third of the problem, but only a third. So it's doing a great job, but it's not big enough to cover it all. We are going to walk away from coal, as I see it, and so the old concept that we would have clean burning coal by now, we don't, or B, that we would just use more coal and grin and bear it doesn't seem to be likely, not under the kind of Kyoto-type protocols we're likely to see. And we now know, and I think everyone here in this audience understands, that while nuclear may have a brilliant future, yet to be debated and yet to be decided, it isn't going to be a major factor between now and 2020. And it's that time between 2010 and about 2016 where I see the maximum vulnerability occurring to our system. So what is going to step in here and do the job? I mean, if it's not going to be LNG and these other coal and nuclear and so on can't substitute, well, I think it's going to be conservation combined with a great deal of going without. I think that in many small nations of the world, the Paraguays and the Madagascars and the Mauritiuses of this world, there's going to be a good deal of going without. And it's going to be a period of hardship for us because the price increases are going to come faster and harder than we expect, because we know that the utility value of oil is very high, and people will make great sacrifices before they get rid of that freedom of mobility, which is so an innate part of our lives. That's how I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be a huge, huge conservation effort. And here's the good news. There isn't a lot of good news, but the good news is that it's going to liberate a huge outpouring of high tech to come up with the machines, the devices, the superconductors, the things that are going to really make a difference. New systems of power generation. It's uncanny what's going on now, and I have to professionally watch it in the backyards and in the research labs. We're lucky in America that we have all this entrepreneurial talent. We're lucky that we've gone through these things like the computer revolution in the past, and we have the people that will turn to this and can turn to it in the high-tech sense. So I think that America will do better than most areas because of our ingenuity, and I think that our government will survive, and in the last analysis, here's the crazy part. Who can say that this constricted life that we're talking about for a few years will bring us tears and unhappiness? Who can say that's here? There are wonderful things that are going to happen. Sunsets are going to be just as beautiful as they were before. Bees are going to return, and you're going to have lots of honey. And there are things to appreciate in life that are so wonderful that returning to that kind of appreciation may be the making of a very happy era for America. Thank you. Yeah, okay. I'm now coming to the most joyful part of the program, and that's to introduce Mr. T. Boone Pickens. I've known Boone for many, many years, and I must say that there are 4 great themes that I have noticed. He will have more, but 4 great themes that illuminate his life. The first, I think, is oil and gas. We all understand that about Boone. Not so well known is his great appreciation and understanding of the water situation in this country and around the world, and his understanding of what role water plays for us in the future, and his investments in water have been very canny and very positive for the country. Lastly, Boone is a very excited about the role of exercise. He always arranged for his Mesa people to have a good place to exercise, keep them in fit, keep their tummies in control. I'm having problems myself these days. And I've always enjoyed that part, that sports and athletic sense, because it has an exuberant American spirit to it. I think that Boone next has given back so much more than he has received. This is something that makes America a special place. It makes capitalism work. It's a wonderful, generous thing, and it's got to happen more and more, because these are going to be tighter times, and those with wealth who give so generously as Boone does are terribly important to the system, because they have the minds to pick the places where the money will do the most good. And lastly, I think that Boone is a believer in entrepreneurial activity that adds value to his life, yes, but I think value to his employees' life, value to the companies that investors own that he has an interest in, and in the end, great values have been added to the country as a whole by shuffling the cards on the industrial side and in the oil business and coming up with new and better fixtures. He didn't sometimes take over these companies, but he shook them up and forced them to make changes. And those changes led into the period we have now of huge profits and started a shuffling process that was long, long overdue. So please welcome Boone Pickens. We're so glad to have him. Thank you.
How are we going to sit?
Pardon?
How are we going to sit?
You can sit there and Charlie will sit here. Bring the mic up. Hey, why don't you pose the first question? Pose the first question to the mic and then we'll work.
All right, okay.
Sit here.
Wire me up.
A little break from the conference process to this point. Charlie's going to ask the questions, and we'll all listen, okay? So don't run up with cards and that sort of thing. Thanks.
Boone, all your life. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Boone has a stentorian voice. It's a wonderful one for a long way. And when he would shout, I'm sure everybody in Mesa used to listen, right?
Of course. I was the boss.
Boone, you've spent a life in natural gas. I think that sometimes when they drain your blood to test it, they wonder what this little thing across their bottom, it says Hugoton, says. I don't know why that says there, but that Hugoton is in your blood. And
I think you're right.
so I wonder if you would speak a little bit about natural gas, because there is a great deal of ambiguity about how the appearance of LNG will play out as a negative versus the fact that we are in greater difficulties all the time finding good gas reserves in this country, and we have greater need and use for gas for environmental purposes than ever before. So those things play against each other. How do you think it will come out?
Okay. I have been surprised that I shouldn't be, with 1,400 rigs running, that we did bring on a lot of natural gas in the last couple of years. Actually, we didn't decline last year. We added to the reserve base, and I think our deliverability by about 1 billion cubic feet of gas a year. That's good. But we also know that the shale gas, and that's what I'm talking about, the unconventional gas reserves that have come on, they do have a rapid decline curve. I think the LNG, if I can switch over it just a second, that's in a global market. And LNG produced in the Mideast is going to go where the price is best. And there's no question that the Chinese I was in China last month, and I went over and to talk to them about, I started a company called Clean Energy Fuels, and we do natural gas fueling for vehicles, heavy duty and equipment, usually fleets and buses. So I went over and looked at their system. They have 4,000 natural gas buses on Beijing Transit. Mass transit system has 4,000 natural gas buses, which is the largest fleet of natural gas buses in the world. But I went over and it looked like one of our stations in California. The equipment was very similar. They had Cummins Westport engines in the buses, and it had one missing link, Charlie. They don't have the gas. Nothing too serious, but when you got down to it, it was kind of like my mother used to say, that guy is a person that will invite you to a duck dinner, but you have to bring the duck. And here I had to bring the gas with me. When we finally finished talking, I said, where now will the gas come from? They said, well, you'll have to bring it in. And you don't have to do that in the natural gas fueling business. There's a lot of places you can go where they have natural gas, Peru being one, and all. So I won't be going back to China to fuel any buses or trucks over there because I'm not going to take the natural gas. But the LNG, as I see it, it's going to go for the world market price. Whoever pays the most, it'll go there. And a lot of cargoes will be put on the water, and the destination may not be known until they've been out for several days. They'll go to the highest price. And to me, we're going to import more of what we're importing now. We import 62% of our oil, and as LNG comes into the market, we'll import more and more of the LNG.
Right. Will this allow prices in the United States to say perhaps within a $6 to $9 range? How do you think it will influence prices?
Well, tell me what the weather's going to do.
Normal.
Normal, that's good. Normal weather will, we won't see any $6 natural gas with normal weather. I think that the natural gas is, we're oversupplied momentarily in the United States with natural gas. So you're probably going to see, maybe you could see $6.50 briefly, maybe in the spring of next year if you have a very mild winter, but you told me it's going to be normal. But you could see it again. 2008 could be a low year for the price of natural gas. I think 2009 it'll pick back up. You've got to come back and reconnect with crude oil. You may decouple for a year, no more than 2 years, but it's such a valuable fuel. I think it will move out of power generation over a 10-year period, and it will be a transportation fuel.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely important for the value of the fuel, and it's good for the country, and the economics are very good because natural gas as a transportation fuel will always be cheaper than diesel and gasoline.
Charlie, let me make a comment. With the entire capacity in the world today for LNG is only about 19 or 20 billion feet a day. And by 2015, we're only adding about another 22 billion. And just as Boone says, when you look at the other competing markets around the world that are closer to sources of supply, we only see maybe over that entire 8-year period, perhaps an added 4 or 5 billion feet getting to the U.S., and about half of that will be offset by declining exports from Canada. So no significant impact on supply-demand balance or price out for the next 7 or 8 years.
Very interesting, Henry. Very, very interesting.
You're not, if we're ever oversupplied with oil or natural gas, it will only be briefly.
Yeah.
Very good. Unconventional new supplies, will they, at first it was just Barnett and Fayetteville. Now it's spreading to the Appalachians, and it's spreading to North Dakota, and it's going all over. And then Canada, they're starting. Were they going to find a lot, or is this a last hurrah for unconventional?
My question?
Yeah.
Last hurrah. Yeah, I'm not this geologist a long time ago, I don't do much wildcatting anymore. It's too hard to find. And what you do find, you can't find anything big. And so when you start talking about Appalachia and the Fayetteville Shale, it's peanuts.
Yeah.
I'll make a comment, Charlie. If you look over the last 10 years, as Boone was referring earlier, we more than tripled the total number of gas well completions, and the actual total production declined a little. But more significantly, during that 10 years, the average first-year production rate per well drill declined from 1.1 million feet a day to 450,000 cubic feet a day. So, escalator running steeper and steeper and faster and faster.
Scary. Okay, very good. What about compressed natural gas abroad? Is this something that Henry's charts showed that a good proportion of oil was still being used abroad for general utility electric generation purposes? That would be a natural changeover, as it already has occurred in the United States, to natural gas, if natural gas is going to stay on a thermal basis a good deal cheaper than oil. That may be addressed to you, Henry, because it's your slide, but do you think that there is a changeover there where gas will be substituting for oil abroad?
The problem is restraints on the supply side. These new LNG projects originally were budgeted at about $5 billion per project. They're now up to $10 billion or more, and there are constraints in fabrication and skills and so on. So there are fewer of them coming on, and they're being delayed. So the total world gas consumption today is a little under 300 billion a day. And here we're adding, as I described earlier, only about 20 or 22 billion a day in 8-9 years. That's not going to solve anybody's problems.
We're running out.
Yeah.
Is where we are. And that, to me, the only way you're going to kill the demand is with price.
Right.
Yeah, it's the only solution.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
But I am a believer in nuke. I think that it's been a fuel that's been proven, and it will work and all. But the other day somebody said, well, you've said you think that nuke is a alternative that could do the work for us. Said, have you invested any money in a nuke project? And I said, well, I'm going to answer a question with a question, which is not polite, I don't think. But I said, how long do you think, this was on CNBC, and Joe Kernan asked me this question. And I said, Joe, how long do you think it'll be to get a nuke project on? And he said, well, I think it'd be 15 years. I said, take 79 and add 15 to it. Enough said. That's too far for me to be putting my money in a deal.
Yeah.
Charlie.
That is the big problem. Now, I've saved this one a long time, Boone, just for you. How do the major oil companies look as contributors to the energy business over the next 15 to 20 years of peak oil transformation and change? How do they look to you as organizations that can help, or will they hinder, or will they be in the way? I mean, you have a unique role in shaking them up and making changes, but it now looks like they may be entering another era, and I'm wondering whether some young Boone Pickens are waiting in the background to come in and begin to change them.
Well, they're going to have to be young Boone Pickens. It won't be old Boone Pickens. I caused some things to happen, no question, but I never did acquire one of the majors. City Service wasn't a major, but it was a big company. But Gulf, City Service, Phillips, and Unical were the ones that I made a run at. But I think that, you know, the repurchase of your stock in the market is telling the market something. And all of them are repurchasing their stock. Yeah. And it's telling the market that we can't grow. And but I don't think buying your stock back in is the way to go. I think the way to go is increase the dividend. I like that. Good. I only heard one hand, but that's good. You've got to start somewhere. But the dividend at the rate of the taxes that you pay on it, 15% on the dividend is the time to increase the dividend. And if you're going to, if these companies, most all of them, are not replacing their reserves. So if you extend them out, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, what's going to happen is major oil companies will be more of a manufacturing operation, and the reserves will be gone, and they'll still be refining, marketing, and all. But I have to believe the next card for the majors will be to dramatically increase dividend. And if you look at Exxon, for instance, their cash flow is $50 billion, their CapEx is $20 billion, their dividend is $7.5 billion, and they're buying back about $25 billion worth of stock a year. They're buying back 7% of the stock a year. Well, compound 7%, and they've eaten themselves at some point in the future, and they've bought themselves back. I think they should, all these companies should double the dividend and cut the buyback.
By saying this, you are also saying that they may not have a very great role in finding new reserves and solving the energy problem.
Well, I don't think that the majors, when you say, if somebody asked me the other day, said, do you think you can get more than 85 million barrels a day out of the world? And that's my number, is 85 million, and demand is 88 million in the fourth quarter. So the $90 a barrel does not surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if it went to $100 a barrel. I'm not predicting that, but I do think it'll go to 100 before it goes back to 80. But What point was I making, Charlie?
Well, will the oil companies be part of the solution, or will
Well,
they
when
be?
you look at, I know the point, that when you look at the 85 million barrels, what part of the 85 does Exxon? Oh, I know. The question that I asked myself, I guess, was that if could you get more than 85 million barrels a day out of the world? You could if they had all turned it over to Exxon. Okay, they're not going to do that. We know, but 75% of all the oil in the world is controlled by state-owned oil companies.
Right.
Venezuela, Saudi Aramco, and how much of it does Exxon control? What, 3%?
Yeah, and they're,
So-
number 8 or number 9 now among the producers?
Yeah, and so 3% of the 85 million.
And the bulk of their production, most of the majors, are certainly in Exxon's, is in North America, the North Sea, the rapidly depleting regions, and no opportunity to replace that.
Yes.
Because of the government oil companies now controlling most of the important areas. And so they're basically in liquidation from the standpoint. Exxon was the wisest about it, I think, because they started this 25, 28 years ago and bought in almost half their stock since that time.
That's right, but I don't think that is the best plan.
Yeah.
I think the best plan is to send it to the owners of the company. Yeah. Stockholders do own companies, and managements are employees. I understand that, and I think everybody else does. But we'll see how it goes. But I think they have to go to more to an increased dividend.
And your earlier comment was certainly sound. Exxon today buys half of the crude they need to refine. They're the best technical, logistics, refining, market organization in the world, and they will continue to have that dominant position for a long time.
But, Henry, when you look at what's available to the majors to drill, well, there's nothing in Saudi Arabia, for instance. I don't think exploration in Iraq is something that anybody wants to do. I don't want your floor hands out there with helmets on instead of steel. The tin hats. It gets it's dangerous. Okay, but you go around and the majors will say, if they'll open up Anwar, if they'll give us the OCS, if they'll open up the federal lands in the West. That ain't going to happen. The Democrats are not going to open that up. And so those lands are not available for exploration. And they can't get into the foreign countries anymore. They'll take you into Russia, and I heard one of the Exxon people say that they can go into Russia as a consultant. Yeah. Russia would like to have their know-how. They'd like to get help on the deep water. They'd like to, Russians don't have that kind of technology, but Exxon's not going to do that unless they have some equity in the deal. And it isn't going to happen. It's the whole thing, I think, Charlie, is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And as it does that, the price keeps going up.
Right. Would you like to say something about water?
Water? I think it's great to drink. It's much better than bourbon, I can tell you that. You remember the old, nobody in the room, well, maybe, remembers Babe Ruth playing for the Yankees, and it was, I think Miller Huggins was the manager, wasn't he?
Yeah,
and
so.
They had made a swing in the West, and that was when a road trip in the major leagues was in a train. Airplanes were not advanced at that point, and you didn't go further west than St. Louis and play the Browns in the American League. Anyway, well, they were on the train, and these guys had gotten tired. The trip was long, and they were drinking quite a bit. The Yankees were, and they were in a slump. And he had to pull them out of it, so he took them to the club car, and he had 2 glasses, 2 tumblers there, and he said, boys, he said, I want you to look at this real close. He said, I'm going to put an earthworm in this glass of bourbon, which a lot of you are drinking a lot of, is bourbon. And now he said, I've been talking 3 more minutes, and this earthworm has rolled over, it's white, and it's dead. I'm going to pass this around the room for you to see. So they passed the glass around, and he said, now here I have a glass of water, and I'm going to put another earthworm in it. And now I've talked another 3 minutes, and this earthworm loves it. He's paddling around in this water. I'm going to pass this around for you to see. They passed it around and got back to Babe Ruth, and he said, oh, I get it, Miller. He said, if you drink bourbon, you won't have worms. Water.
Well, very good.
Water. I think I'm the largest owner of groundwater. That water being below the surface is groundwater. That on the surface is surface water. Surface water in the state of Texas is owned by the state. The water, the groundwater, is owned by the landowners. And in the Ogallala Aquifer, which extends from Midland, Texas to the South Dakota border across 8 states, and it's the largest aquifer in North America, I own over 200,000 acres of water in Roberts County, Texas, which is, is north of Pampa, northeast of Amarillo, and 328 miles to move that water to the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth. And we will do that. We will move 200,000 acre-feet of water a year. The Ogallala in West Texas produces about 5.8 million acre-feet of water a year. Most of that goes to irrigation. 96% of it does. 60 Minutes came down and was going to do a story on this because they thought, Boone Pickens, and he's doing something horrible again, like trying to take over a major oil company. Now he's going to take all the water out of the Panhandle of Texas. And so they came down to talk to me, and I said, first fellas, I said, this isn't even a story. They said, know this, we decide what the story is, not you. Okay. They said, we're going to go talk to the people in West Texas and find out whether it's a story or not. They came back in about a week and sat down and said, let me ask you something. They said, if you produce 200,000 acre-feet of water out of Roberts County, Texas, and transported it down to the Metroplex, said, could you drain Kansas? And I said, no, you can't drain Kansas. The transmissivity of water is very, very slow. He said, could you drain the Panhandle of Oklahoma? And I said, no, I can't even drain the county next to me. And the guy looked at me and he said, maybe we don't have a story. So they didn't do the story.
Oh, good. I know you're quite a sportsman, and I know you are physically fit, and I know you like to have the people around you think about exercise in their own lives. Do you have any thoughts on physical fitness in America and obesity and that problem?
If they would make me czar of health and energy in the United States, and I'd only report to the president every quarter, that I could help the situation. First on health, yes, obesity it's a tough deal, and it's devastating to diabetes, and there are so many people that wouldn't have diabetes if they watch their weight and exercise. I got into this a long time ago. I grew up in a family that I can still remember my grandmother said, Sonny said, if you do everything in moderation but one thing, you will have good health and a happy life. And I said, what's that one thing? She said, the one thing you can't do in moderation is smoke. So I never smoked. She also told me that if I didn't smoke cigars like my father and I didn't drink coffee, that coffee, will stunt your growth. That's what she said. Mm-hmm. And I'm not very tall, but I didn't drink coffee. But I went to her when I was 20, and I said, Grandmother, you said if I didn't smoke cigars or drink coffee, I would be 6 feet tall. And she said, I know I told you that, Sonny, but if you had, you may not have been 5 feet tall. So, health is, the three of us know about health. And we've gotten pretty far down the road and enjoyed good health. This morning I work out every day. I do treadmill at 4.0 speed and 8 elevation for 20 minutes. And I curl 35s. And so, I'm in there trying to stay alive, but more than that, I want to have a good quality of life, of course. And so many of my friends have struggled, and some are gone, but most of them did not take care of themselves like they should. The older when you're 20, 30, 40, even 50, you can abuse yourself pretty good with what you put in your mouth. But after you get up 60, 70, 80, you really think back and think, oh my God, I wish I hadn't done it. But the water's under the bridge at that point, and what you did, you're going to have to live with. But I put in that program, at Mesa in '69. We built a fitness center, and I could quantify the results. But I paid for a $3 million fitness center. We went self-insured, had the best insurance of any company, but a lot of things happened, and the people worked. They signed up. They went to fitness. We had fit time. You could work it out with your manager in the company. You could take the time whenever he agreed you could take it. You gave the time back. You either came early or stayed late or whatever you wanted to do. But it was incredible, the results that we had. We had the lowest off time of anybody in the E&P group. We had the cheapest insurance cost, and it was, I know it works. And today, I don't think you've been in our offices in Dallas, but we have a fitness area there, and we have a full-time trainer, and everybody there, goes in and works on it.